Wicked for Good is the second and concluding chapter of the story that was set forth in motion in last year's Wicked. In fact, it's releasing exactly a year after that, and it'll be in theaters this weekend. Previously on Wicked, Elphaba was titled the Wicked Witch of the West after she tried to expose Oz for the fraud he was for not having any real magical powers, and also inadvertently having her powers read the grimoire and create the flying monkeys. And a call was sent out to hunt down the Wicked Witch as soon as possible. At this point of time, Glinda is looked at as an example of good, and she is propped up as such, and she is trying to project that image to others around in the face of the danger, quote unquote, from Elphaba. However, because Elphaba is also the closest friend that she's ever had, Glinda has some conflicts about everything that's happening, and they're trying to find solutions to fixing all of this, but none seem to be coming up, and things are getting much more serious. I was very pleasantly surprised by what the first Wicked movie did. I went into that knowing what it was, but I hadn't seen the Broadway musical, unfortunately, so I wasn't fully aware of where the story was going to go when it came to exploring these two characters. But I found myself really enjoying it, and I quite loved the first movie, actually. And so I was very excited to see what they would do in Wicked for Good and how they would conclude this story and how they would eventually connect it into The Wizard of Oz and the events that we eventually know take place. And right out the gate, something that once again works really well with Wicked for Good, much as it did with the first movie, are the performances. Everybody over here is incredibly committed and they are turning in some incredible work, particularly our two leads. Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande, I said this in my previous review as well, are just wonderfully cast for Glinda and Elphaba. And the way that they portray these characters is nothing short of wonderful. They both got Oscar nominations for this for the first movie, which I wasn't really surprised by, and I'm pretty sure they're gonna get it for this movie as well. I think both of them once again do terrific work, and when it comes to the musical numbers, there's some really great range from them, particularly a couple of times with Cynthia Erivo. There's a song called No Good Deed Goes Unpunished, which she performs. It's magnificent. It's one of the more goosebump inducing moments of the movie. Fantastically executed. And I would honestly say that Ariana Grande in this movie is better than the first one, and I thought she was excellent in that movie. In a lot of ways, she is doing a lot of the heavy lifting when things are going down in this movie. And I think that her range, her emotional range, and the things that she's going through, I think she plays it wonderfully. This is a fantastic performance, and it really does deserve all of the love that it can get. Jonathan Bailey as Fiyero is once again really great. He is a little more muted in this compared to the first time that we saw him. There are more serious things going on, but I think he does a really good job. And I also really liked the things that you get with and I also really like the turns from Ethan Slater and Marissa Bode as Bach and Nessa Rose. I think they did a really good job too. Some really great moments with them, and I think that especially with Bach, there's a couple of things that really did hit, especially if you know where things go with his character as you approach the Wizard of Oz. Jeff Goldblum and Michelle Yeoh are once again also really good. Jeff Goldblum in particular has a couple of really fun moments over here that I thought he did a great job with. The musical numbers in this are also really solid. They are much more somber compared to the first movie, but then again, the movie itself is much more somber. This is a darker chapter of the story, and as I mentioned earlier, the walls that are closing in on Glinda and Elphaba, especially when it comes to orchestrating certain events or making certain things happen that continue to escalate tensions and continue to make Elphaba an enemy of the people. I think that what they do over there, some of the moments that you get over there musically, there is a bittersweet aspect to them that I think they really nailed, and some moments that really did, you are very much swept up in. It leads to some really great performances. There's one very emotionally impactful one in particular between Ariana Grande and Cynthia Erivo, where they performed the title song essentially for good. And this is spectacular. This is a brilliantly directed and very emotionally powerful moment of the movie, and I think they nailed that. From a technical standpoint, also for the most part, I think For Good is great. It is a wonderfully crafted movie. The production designs and set designs are immaculate. The art direction is phenomenal as well. The choreography and the costume designs. I mean, on a technical level, it pretty much does all of the things correctly. The visual effects, I will say, are also solid. However, there is that bit of a overblown backlighting thing going on, which was with the first movie as well. Sometimes that would obscure other elements and other details that were in the shot, and I just didn't particularly love that. And I do think that while it's a little more toned down in this one compared to the first one, it is something that did keep coming up. And at the end of the day, there is a fairly compelling story told over here about two friends who want to see everything through thick and thin, and they just cannot stand the amount that is taking place in order to maintain something that is fundamentally broken from the inside, and wanting to rise above that in some way, but the trials and tribulations that are coming along with it. When it comes to that friendship and when it comes to that aspect of the story, I think they do a fairly good job. However, I had mentioned that I don't think it's as good as the first one, because this one, as I also mentioned, is, however, as I mentioned earlier, this is also a movie that is concurrently taking place with The Wizard of Oz. And so certain events happen in this movie that are very much keyed into that aspect, so that when things eventually go down in The Wizard of Oz, you have a little more context as to how things ended up the way that they were. In those moments, I think the movie is at its choppiest, where I feel like it wants to try and bring in all of those elements in the best ways that it can, but I feel like it does it in some ways that just feel very oddly placed. And I also don't really understand what they're doing with some of the elements, especially when it comes to obscuring certain aspects of it. There's one thing in particular that they do which I don't really understand it. It's a choice that they made when it comes to revealing a character. And while this is a character who is very prominent in the story, you don't get a lot of face time with the character. It just makes it feel very oddly edited in as well every now and then, like that entire section of it. And I feel like that could have been a little better handled. I get that they eventually have to connect it to The Wizard of Oz. That's not my problem with it, but I wish that it was a bit more fine-tuned. There are some moments with pacing that I feel like are a bit odd as well. Some moments drag quite a bit in the first act especially, and some things I feel towards the third act are very quickly executed. And even though the movie is about 20 minutes shorter than the first part, it's only 2 hours and 18 minutes long or something like that, this version, I felt like there were things over here that felt like they dragged more than that one did. And I feel like that also did have an impact on how certain things were playing out. There were some character decisions as a result of that that I would have liked to have spent a little more time with, but I feel like we get to those things so quickly that we kind of just have to take it in stride as the movie is going on. And because that's happening, sometimes some moments don't get enough time to breathe. Something happens at one point of time which is very directly related to Elphaba. And I feel like the movie very much just speed runs the response to that, as well as it tonally mismatches what comes immediately after. And while the sequence that follows is very entertaining, I also felt like the way that it was sort of put together, just it could have been a little better. But besides all of that, I still think that Wicked for Good is fairly solid viewing. I don't think it's as good as part one. I think it is a step down a little bit so, but I still think that it's a very solid viewing, and I think that it is still very pleasantly surprising for the most part. And I am happy with how these movies seem to have turned out in the end. Like as a whole, I think they did a fairly good job of adapting this to the big screen. And props to John Chu as a director for pulling this off. This is obviously a Herculean task to make. This is such a beloved musical that if you mess up in any way, it feels like that's something you'd carry. But he never really messed up like that. Like I feel like overall he landed this fairly effectively. And at the end of the day, you get two solid movies out of this that are really good adaptations of that material. And eventually, when they tie into The Wizard of Oz, and if you want to rewatch that at some point of time and connect it a little bit more, you can probably do that and have some fun with it. I'm going to give Wicked for Good an 8 out of 10. Guys, thank you very much as always for watching. Let me know what you guys thought of Wicked for Good if you saw it. And if you haven't seen it, let me know what you think of Wicked in general in the comments down below. As always, if you like this, please do subscribe. Thank you very much once again, guys. And I'll see you guys at the movies.